Hi everyone, I'm Corey Weathers. I am a military spouse. I'm a licensed professional counselor in the states of Georgia and Colorado, and I was last year's 2015 Armed Forces Insurance Military Spouse of the Year. Earlier today, I put on Facebook a post that was a little bit unlike me. Usually, I am super positive and pride myself on not having big debates on Facebook or being negative or playing into negativity that's on social media. And today I've encountered a little bit of frustration in my own life when it came to my career with my profession as a licensed professional counselor. And I decided to put it out on Facebook and just be authentic about that. And I was surprised in a way to see just how many people were glad that I posted that post on Facebook. And so I decided, after thinking about it this afternoon and also talking to my husband, who is a huge encourager in my life, that sometimes when you feel something this strongly and when you know it's authentic and it resonates with other people, sometimes just truth needs to be said. So I'm going to take a moment during this video and share with you the real struggle that exists for military spouses, especially those who are trying to maintain their careers through their certifications and licensure. Now, I'm afraid to appear negative or be negative or bring a lot of voice to this. And I think that there's a lot of military spouses out there that feel the same way. Because I don't want people to look at me and watch this video and say that I'm entitled, that I should just be grateful for what I have, or label me with any kind of negative criticism. And I think that especially over the last year and a half, I have really figured out that I really can't concern myself too much with what people think at some reasonable level. You know, I want to stay professional. I want to be smart and wise with how I use my words and how I use my voice. But that I can't live in fear, especially when it comes to speaking out in truth and validating a lot of people's experiences. And so I wanted to talk to you about how a lot of military spouses are struggling with this issue of maintaining their careers and the real struggle that we have. And I think it's really hard to talk about it because it somehow seems unpatriotic to say, as much as I love my service member and I love being in the military as far as a spouse that supports my service member, I am very proud of our calling as a couple to serve military families. I wouldn't change that for anything. That it feels somehow unpatriotic for me to complain or to pitch a fit about something. And I think the other reason why military spouses often don't talk about this is because we don't want to seem entitled. We don't want to seem like, you know, we're asking for too much, considering how much support America does give us and give our service members and how much people are really trying to make a difference for the military community. And so a lot of us stay quiet. And so I want to start off by saying there are a lot of organizations that are helping those of us with licenses and certifications try to streamline this process and make it easier for us to move from state to state and maintain our careers. Joining Forces has been doing a huge push to get states on board with accepting military spouses' applications quickly and at least be aware of the fact that military spouses struggle with this and we need a way to keep working. And I am extremely appreciative to Joining Forces for that. And in fact, a few weeks ago, the White House asked me to do a video to describe what are my struggles as a military spouse that needs a license to maintain my career. What are my struggles with that? So that I could support the Joining Forces initiative to help these states understand why that this is so important. And there was a very sweet person in the White House that coordinated that with me, and I took about 3 to 4 hours of a very busy day to do a very professional video to talk about those struggles in a very professional way. And it was not her fault, the one that set this up and coordinated it. It was not her fault. But at the end of the day, at the end of the week, what the White House actually put out was instead an interview with Michelle Obama saying how excited she was that all 50 states were on board with helping military spouses in their licensure issue. Unfortunately, it's not an answer. Unfortunately, the struggle is very real. And at the end of that week, what ended up happening is military spouses like me and probably several others that did videos to support the Joining Forces initiative in helping us clear up some of these problems we were the ones by the end of the week that struggled with no answers. We're still struggling, but Michelle Obama had a great week. And it looked like joining forces has done its job. And that's really convenient now that we're ending the Obama term. So this is not a political video, and I'm extremely grateful for what joining forces has done already. But I don't want people to mistake the fact that just because 50 states signed up to support and say that they're going to support military spouses with helping with this problem doesn't mean that it's actually happening in a way that makes a difference. And so I'm going to walk you through my situation. And I hope that you listen to this video all the way through, because I'm not the only one that's struggling with this. And years ago, I decided that I wanted to do advocate work for military spouses in this profession because I was running into so many roadblocks. There had to be an easier way. And I just decided today, if I don't use my voice to do that, then why did I want to be an advocate in the first place? And so I'm not here to say that I need to be entitled to get something that nobody else gets. It's merely pointing out that there is an issue with states communicating to each other that could make this process so much simpler and would really find a wonderful way to support military families and helping their transitions if they would just find a way to streamline this. And it doesn't have to be so hard. So here's the deal. Before we came into the military, I was already getting my license from the state of Georgia. I was meeting all the criteria I needed to meet. I was already having a problem moving from Kentucky to Georgia, actually, because Kentucky had a different standard for supervision as far as the number of years of supervision and the kind of supervision. So I was already wrestling with the state of Georgia and having to go back and get additional supervision from a supervisor who had less education than my previous supervisor because they just had a different idea of what supervision looked like. So I was already working on that when we received orders to go to Colorado. Now, I went to Colorado and I still wanted to keep up my application for Georgia. I didn't want to sink all of that money and all of that effort that I had already started and just say, forget about it. So I was going to work in Colorado to still try to meet those standards in Georgia. The problem is that when you go to another state, in order to work on those standards that you need to work on, you have to have a job. In order for me to get supervision from somebody, I need to have a job seeing clients so that I have something to talk to that supervisor about. The problem is, in Colorado, I can't see clients if I don't have a Colorado license. So now I have to get a job without a Colorado license in order to meet the standards for Georgia. So now I have to apply for a Colorado license. It took me more than 9 months to get the state of Colorado back in 2009. I'm hoping they're a whole lot better now. But back in 2009, it took 9 months for my file to sit on someone's desk before they would open it, read it, and decide whether or not I qualified for a license. After many phone calls and many letters urging them to please take a look at my file and let me know if I was able to get a license there, they finally issued me a license. The problem was we were going to move in 6 months. Now, my husband was sweet enough and gracious enough and is a champion of my efforts enough that he actually asked for us to be stationed back in Georgia. That doesn't happen for most military families. And so we did. We got stationed in we got stationed at Fort Stewart, Georgia. And by then, I was finishing the requirements for my Georgia license. That's a whole other topic, and how I had to be creative in Colorado to keep meeting those standards. But I got to Fort Stewart, I got a job. I worked there for probably a year and a half, thankfully able to use my license. But I'll say that even that was hard because trying to get on insurance panels such as TRICARE to work with military families or any other insurance panel, when I turned in my resume, they wanted me to go back and explain why I had gaps in my employment. Why did I not work for a certain period of time in Colorado? And I had to explain that. And of course, my only answer is I'm a military spouse. I had to move with my spouse to support my service member and couldn't work because I didn't have a license in Colorado. So once I finally got those insurance panels to take me on, I had a wonderful season of working at Fort Stewart. And then we received orders to go to Fort Gordon in Augusta, Georgia. Again, huge blessing for me to stay in Georgia where I could continue to work. Since I already had a license, I immediately got a job once we got to Augusta and was able to keep working. The problem was we would have loved to have been there for about 2.5 years, but we were only there for a year and a half. And it was time for us to go to South Carolina for a 5-month school for my husband. Now, this brings me to last year. Last year, I moved twice. There was no point in me getting another license in the state of South Carolina so that I could work for 6 months. But now I have another gap in my employment history, and I have to explain that to people on a regular basis. Not to mention trying to go get a job and explain to people, number one, these are the reasons why I have gaps in my experience. Number two, I may only be around for a couple years. In fact, I can't even guarantee that. And that's exactly what happened in Augusta. My hope is that we could be there for 3 years. And it ended up we were there for a year and a half. My clients struggled, and so did I, frankly. And it was very difficult to have to leave that after a year and a half. Now, I am in the state of Virginia now, and I have an even bigger problem because I'm trying to maintain my Georgia license that requires a certain number of continuing education. Now, keep in mind, every 2 years, I have to pay $100 to $150 each for my licenses to keep them up. Not to mention however much money it costs for me to keep up my continuing education. And that might vary between state to state. How much continuing education, what kind of continuing education, and keeping up with that is a complete chore. So in the past year, I haven't been able to work. It's been very difficult to keep up my continuing education because the best way to find the continuing education in your state is to join an association of other professionals like you who are putting on those workshops, who are keeping up with the standards in that state. And by the way, that's another $100 and $150 to join those associations in each state. So now I am pretty much cranking out $200 to $300 per year to maintain a license, not counting the continuing education workshops I have to pay for, when I'm not even working and I don't have a job to pay for those things. Now, you have to take into account that these other states and the requirements that they have for their continuing education might be very difficult to keep up with. For example, Georgia wanted me to have 35 hours of continuing education. 3 of those hours have to be face-to-face. 10 of those hours can be only online. The rest of it varies, but pretty much they want those to be face-to-face too if they're only saying 10 of them can be online. Now, I don't know if you know about this, but face-to-face workshops giving you continuing education are extremely expensive. They can range anywhere from $100 for 3 hours of education to sometimes $300-$400 for a day's worth of continuing education. I can't afford something like that, and neither can other military spouses who don't have a job, who don't have a license to work in that state, to maintain face-to-face continuing education standards that are ridiculous. Now, I am certified in 2 different ways to treat PTSD for military families. I love to serve military families. Fortunately, I can get a lot of my continuing education online, and it's all education to serve military families very cheaply, sometimes for free. But if that state won't approve of me getting continuing education online, it all has to be face-to-face, then I'm running into a big problem, and I'm having to fork out a lot of money, professional money, that may not come very easily if I'm a single income family. So here I am in Virginia, and I've decided I'm going to switch to my license from Georgia to Virginia. Why? Not because I plan on staying here for a really long time, but I'm switching it because Georgia's standards for continuing education are so hard to keep up with. They have great reasons for those continuing education standards. Unfortunately, it makes it extremely challenging for me to meet those standards like I just described. In Virginia, they don't really seem to at least care or have listed in their rules where I get those CEUs, except for maybe ethics need to be face-to-face, and that's only 3 hours. So I said, hey, I'm in Virginia. I might want to work in Virginia. I've been here already 6 to 8 months already that I don't have a license, can't work here if I want a job. using my license, but I might as well get a license in Virginia so that I can have the right to work if I would like to, and because their standards seem a little bit more flexible for me to work on. So I'm going to walk you through what this application for Virginia asks of me. I'm not going to show you the papers because I've got identifying information on it of mine, but the first question they ask is, are you a military spouse? Yay, Virginia. Now, this is what Joining Forces has been working on. The great thing is that these states are saying we will expedite military spouses in their applications so that they can get a temporary license, or they can get their license quickly and get to work quickly. And if they don't meet our standards, then we'll give them a temporary license. Only a few states are doing this, by the way. We'll give them a temporary license so they can get started working while they meet the standards. Now, yay for expediting my application. Yay for giving me a temporary license so I can go get a job. That solves the problem that I had back in Colorado and in Georgia. The problem is I don't want a temporary license. I have 15 years of experience doing something that I love to do. And at almost 40 now, I'm starting to feel like I'm pretty good at what it is that I do. And I don't want a temporary license because I don't know how that's going to look to an employer to give me a temporary license. And if I have to meet your standards, what does that mean? If my supervision in Georgia doesn't look the same as your supervision standards in Virginia, then that means what? I need to go now pay $100 an hour to a supervisor to give me more supervision after 15 years of experience of doing a job. Now I have to pay a supervisor to say that I'm doing an okay job and I'm doing an ethical job at working with my clients, and pay them $100 an hour and I'm not getting the income. Why am I working? That's the same as when we go out and work and then we're really only just paying for childcare to work. So why would I want a temporary license when I'm going to have to shell out more money to meet your standards? So yay for Joining Forces for helping us expedite our applications, but it's not the end of the problem. All right, so going through in this application, they're asking about all the right information. They're asking, do I have licenses in other states? All that good stuff. The next thing is that they want a verification. This is an application, by the way, if you have a license in another state and you're wanting to switch. So it's called an application by endorsement. So they want a verification from another state that I have a license in that says, yes, you have a state license there. And they want proof of that. I don't have a problem with that. So they give me a form that I'm supposed to send to Georgia and to Colorado that verifies that I have an active, good standing license in those states. So I contact Colorado and I send them this form, and I did all the work for them. I filled it out for them, and I get an email back that says we don't do verifications of licenses anymore because anybody can get on the website, look up your name, and verify that you have an active license. I think that's a great idea. I don't think that I need a form to verify a license when any person, any civilian or entity can go verify and look it up that I have an active license. So yay, Colorado, that's a great idea. It's free, it's quick, it's easy, not a big deal. So I send the same form to Georgia, and the email that I get back from Georgia says, by the way, I've filled this form out for them already. All they have to do is sign it. And there's also a way on Georgia to look up my license and see that it's active as well. But the email from Georgia says I have to pay Georgia $25 for them to sign this piece of paper and send it back to me and tell the state of Virginia that I have a license there. So I was a little bit upset at that because Colorado is doing it for free. Why should I have to pay Georgia $25 when I'm already paying, by the way, $140 to submit this application to Virginia, of which they may say, you know what, you don't meet our standards, so it's not a refundable application fee. So that's the verification of my license. The next form that I have to fill out is verification of clinical practice. So what Virginia wants is for me to prove that in the last 5 years, have I done at least 2 years of clinical practice. Here's the problem that I have for that. I am one of the lucky few people that just might barely be able to squeeze 2 years out of the last 5 years that I can prove that I was actually in a practice doing counseling within a group practice. And that's because I was lucky enough to be in Georgia twice for 2 different assignments. So what they want, though, is a form that says, here's the dates that this person practiced and where they practiced. When I look back over the last 5 years, last year was a wash. I wasn't able to work anywhere. The one before that was a Augusta, I think I managed a year and a half there. Go rewind before that, maybe a year and a half that I was able to work at Fort Stewart. So I'm lucky. Doesn't count any of the volunteer work that I've done or the volunteer what could be considered clinical experience. And this is a whole other topic of how do we use our volunteer stuff, because there's a lot of states that are now saying it has to be paid work too. And again, you can't get a job to get paid if you don't have a license in that state. So now I have to go back and track down those group practices and have them look up my records, or I can fill this out too, and hopefully have 24 months that I can prove that I actually was doing counseling. All right, so then the next section is asking for my education. I totally understand that. Every state wants to make sure that you meet core standards. The problem is that 15, 20 years ago in my education, there may be some core classes that they've added that weren't really that important 20 years ago, 15 years ago. So a lot of our spouses are going to run into that problem when they now have to fill it out for a new state and standards have changed. The last part of this form asked me to verify that my internship when I was in school 15 years ago, how many hours I worked at that internship. And now I have to send this form back to a professor. Thankfully, I have a great working relationship with this professor. From 15 years ago, have to go back and find that professor and have them sign a piece of paper that says that I did an internship for so many hours. Rather than me being able to just submit a resume or do something else to show that. Here's the deal. I'm frustrated. I am lucky that I have a wonderful, supportive husband that has an income that some of our military families don't get. And do I have to work? Probably not. Not really. We can live great off of my husband's income. But I also feel like I have a calling. I've always loved to do counseling, and I'd like the right to be able to have a career. I'm not asking for special treatment. I'm not asking for people to do something for me that they wouldn't do for other people. I'm asking for states to communicate to each other. I'm asking for one license, one national license, one standard, and to grandfather some of us in who have been doing this for years and years. It is unbelievable for me to be educating myself, for meeting standards, for me to have 15 years of experience working with families doing counseling, and for 8 years of that to be specifically with military families, certified to work with PTSD, knowing the culture. When I was at these group practices as a military spouse clinician, I had a waiting list of military families that wanted to see me. Yet, I have to go and prove myself to every state and every insurance panel why they should approve of me to do counseling when I have gaps in my employment, or why I'm struggling to get a license there. Never mind, it's been 8 months into Virginia that I'm just now getting this license. We'll be lucky if we're able to be here for 3 years. It would be very difficult, and this is what a lot of spouses are running into, for me to now go to an employer, which, by the time I'd actually get my license, hopefully it would be expedited as a military spouse. But let's just tack on, 3-4 months to that. Then I'm lucky if I can get in and work for a year and a half. This is way too much chaos for military spouses who have these professions to try to maintain a career when you're constantly going back and forth between a 2-income family and a 1-income family. And then as a 1-income family, having to maintain all of these fees and all of these struggles and fighting with all this paperwork. And my file is getting bigger and bigger with forms that I have to fill out, continuing education that I have to meet for each state. It can be a whole lot more simple than this. All we have to do is recognize that it's a struggle and make it easier, streamline the process. And if you are going to make big changes like K-CREP and changes of what core classes and education and standards and all of that stuff, then you better be ready to grandfather some of us in. There's too many points of confusion, and this is way too hard. So end of rant. I hope some of you have been validated by this experience. I hope some of you will share it, because we need a much better plan than this, and I'm tired of quietly struggling and quietly being frustrated. And I hope Michelle Obama sees this and sees that, yay, thank you for the 50 state support. That's a huge step, but it's not enough.